and the portrait portion of it was painted from life. And so I was learning how to really manipulate oils then, and trying to get, play with light and shadow and depth and hair texture and all of that. And I remember that class where the instructor, at least in regards to me, would not say anything positive. If I was doing a good job, he would just walk by and glare and just keep going. And then if there was something that he objected to, then he would stop and kind of lay into me um, and he like he didn't know how to be supportive of it. I don't know if that was a particular way style of teaching that perhaps he was, and maybe that's how he learned, or if he was just being an old crusty bigot. But I don't know. Regardless, you know, that class out that first year of art school was very intense for me. I remember being exhausted. I remember actually like I was sitting on a stool while I was painting this and starting to fall asleep because I hadn't slept in days trying to get all work done, and like literally falling off my stool because I was so exhausted. Um, so this piece sat unfinished. A lot of the unfinished portions you see there that I didn't paint in was because I didn't really have time in that class painting like to finish that. And years later, I kind of went and dug out some old canvases and dug out this canvas and it's like, what does this mean to you now? And I had been transferred from the art school when I started my arts education, Columbus College of Art and Design. I transferred to Howard University, which is a historically black college. And I had taken so many arts classes at art school that when I got to Howard, the majority of my classes were history and sociology and psychology and because it was, even though I was an arts major, I still had to do all these liberal arts requirements that were required in art school. So I learned a lot about Black American art history. And there were whole sections where they talked about the enslaved artisans and themes and stuff in Black art during enslavement. And one of them was, particularly for Black women, was quilt making. So I started diving into what are the themes and stuff that were in enslaved women's quilts from that time period. And probably were African folk tales that were sewn into these antebellum quilts. And so that's what a lot of the imagery is that's beneath it. So I would write it in quilt squares. There's a leopard and a crocodile and other symbols and stuff that you can see in like African patterns and things like that, and stories that incorporate aspects from Christianity, but also African folktales, and wove those into the composition here. So I wanted to kind of reflect that, and I wanted to give the sitter a story, and kind of digging into is like what is the history of Black women's art in this country, and starting here. So that's kind of evolution of this piece. Now the date on that is 2002. That's when I added the references to the themes in antebellum slave books. And I painted the portion like in 1990. when I first started college. So telling my age. But this is a piece that, to get it to the finish line, it took basically that long. There were two different spurts of painting on this piece. And I think that it's kind of is indicative of, it's like as an artist, when you would have time to produce. It was interesting that, painting this portrait in art school, I'm falling off from my students, I'm so exhausted, and being asked to crank out work at such a tremendous speed, when I painted the rest, I was remembering all the history and stuff that I learned from these classes about Black art, which they did not cover at all at art school. I had to go to Howard for those classes. And I remember I was back in Indianapolis. It was years after I graduated, and I was renting this beautiful art studio in downtown Indianapolis that looked out over the city. And I was in this big empty room looking at these old canvases, like, how do I make these relevant to me? And adding that bit of history and story to go with the portrait was what resonated with me. And those were two very different parts of my career. The second piece I have in the show is Jimmy Hendrix, which is a weird monster wall. And this piece is from 2020. And of course, we all know what happened in 2020, the pandemic. And I had several commissions that I was supposed to do. And one of them involved painting a series of large murals for Sound Transit. And I had a shared studio space, and I had planned to paint these large murals in person at this shared studio space. Then the pandemic hit and everything shut down. And I decided, you know what? There's no way I can roll out 5, 10 canvases that are 5 by 10 foot long in this house. So I said, well, can I pivot to digital? Looking at all the beautiful art on IG, and it's like these artists are creating stuff on their iPads, and it's like maybe I need to, I started to feel old, and maybe I should get with the times and learn how to make some digital art. Because when I was back in 1990 in art school, painting the portrait portion of that piece, the first version of Photoshop was out. And I remember my art professors being like, oh, this is going to put us out of business. Well, that didn't happen, it was just a tool. But I was like, actually, I really need to get on board and see what doing digital art how I could use that as a tool in my career. So took the leap, used some of the money from my unemployment benefits, because everybody's stuck in the house, and got myself a new iPad, and took some online courses to learn how to use Procreate. And I said, okay, this is kind of fun. I'm like feeling my way around this. And then they had a virtual live paint in honor of Jimmy that I was participating in. And this is one of the pieces I did doing virtual live paint. And it was on Zoom, and everybody was sharing from their screens, and you could see everybody drawing the thing. And this is one of the pieces I did during that. And I was like, okay, this came out pretty good. I'm kind of satisfied with this. And I was like, okay, that became a way for me to not only do my public art, but my own, individual art. So this is one of the pieces from the live paint, and I started exploring talking about doing larger pieces I couldn't do in an open studio anymore. Well, I did finish that project for Sound Transit by doing those pieces digitally and sending those digital files in, and Sound Transit was able to just have them printed out, which was fortunate because when those pieces were hung up, there were vandals that kept coming through the area and destroying the pieces and slicing them and stuff like that, and they could just be reprinted or taped back together and be rehung. Where some of the other artists who had painted on canvas had to, take them down and physically repaint them. Mine could just be reprinted. So it's okay, I see the value now in working in this media, doing digital work. And I kind of, since 2020, have doubled down on learning how to use digital art to prototype some of my public art. So I'm doing more public art work now. Actually, some of my permanent public art murals for Sound Transit have just been installed at the Redmond station. And those were fabricated. I did those designs digitally, and they were fabricated in porcelain and enamel and mosaic. And so those pieces are 12 by 6 each, 12 feet by 6 feet, and there's like 5 of them. I think the opening for that station is going to be around Mother's Day in May. So I'm excited to see the pieces really installed, and I think we're going to have a ribbon cutting and celebration and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, that because I took a leap and decided to switch, mediums and use a new tool. That portion of my career started with a piece like this. This is me teaching myself how to do work on iPad, and the culmination is, the permanent 6 by 10 foot murals that are put at the radio station. They're all done on digital. My design was digitally been fabricated by fabricators who were able to take that design and work with it. So that helps inform my artwork now. I do more public art stuff. Since then, I have done commissions for Evergreen Tacoma's campus, the bust of Dr. Mims, who's the founder of Evergreen Tacoma. And also, I'm working on a new project for the Gateway Center in Portland. And I'll probably do some prototypes and drafts digitally of what that sculpture will look like, so I can present that through design group. So that I found it to be really, really useful, making that pivot from working strictly traditional to more digital work. And I made that pivot in 2020. Out of necessity. So, does anybody have questions?
I usually have a million questions, but I think
I don't want to volunteer.
what I love about what you have in this show is a demonstration of sort of an embrace of education. Like starting with an educational experience that was not good, but you made something really beautiful and then you made it better with what you were able to add to, I'm going to take a leap of faith and teach myself how to do this other thing. And God, that's like, it's amazing. And then, yeah, I love hearing about your process of how you're adapting and changing and growing. And I think I might be like 1 year younger than you, so we're all old.
Well, it's interesting. I think that, especially when I'm doing oil painting over here, it's such a traditional old school medium. And I was trying to master that. But the lessons that I learned there helped inform that, and working digitally. And it's like there's brushes in my program where you can kind of recreate the texture of oil paint. And all the stuff you can do digitally on with computer code and programs and devices. And it's so cool. And I'm excited about it. And it's kind of like in 2020, I had the time to sit down and teach myself how to do this new thing. And I'm glad that it kind of broke me out of my comfort zone. And I had time to really dive into learning a new medium. And I had the motivation to do it because there was simply no way I was going to be able to finish those commissions without doing something different. So that's why these two pieces showing them together. And it's like, what, I'd like to see these two pieces and exhibit when I submitted them for. In previous years in the show, I've submitted photography and also some other paintings, but these two pieces are important to me because of the time periods they kind of represent in my career. And kind of the different milestones, and starting with learning painting from an instructor that was not really interested in me. He didn't. There are a lot of those instructors that I had in 1990 at Columbus College of Art and Design. Not people were very happy about having women or minorities in the classes, and they weren't necessarily very welcoming. And they kind of let you know it. And under the guise that I'm toughening you up. This is how the world's going to treat you. And it's like, no, that's you. Still getting what I needed from that experience and then using it for my benefit. Is what I was able to do and move forward, and jump from 1990 to 2020 to make another pivot. So I think career could continue to advance. Yes.
You forgot to mention your cut metal sculpture. You forgot to mention your cut metal sculpture for the library.
Oh yeah. So my husband is referring, who's behind the camera, is referring to a series of sculptures that I did for the Spokane libraries. They were cut metal, and I did the designs digitally, and I was able to work with the fabricator to have those pieces cut and fabricated and powder coated, painted, and ultimately installed at grounds outside of the library in Savannah. So that's another example of me being able to work digitally to do a design that eventually became a durable, permanent public art piece.
I'm sorry, maybe you could mention the time that it happened? Because it was like winter time.
Oh, with delivery. Oh,
yeah.
Delivery. Yes. Often I think that public art, I really love doing public art because it is such a collaborative way to work. And your work lives in the public space and can be enjoyed by the entire community. It's not sequestered in a museum or a gallery where people feel like they can't come in. That's not TCC, but many people galleries, the commercial galleries are like that, where they aren't necessarily welcoming to people who don't have equity to actually collect art. And I like that my public artwork can live in the real world. And losing my train of thought now. But that's because it is in a public space, that adds additional time to it. There's permits that have to be gotten. There's property lines to be respected. There's construction schedules, especially if it's tied to, expansion or building over building. And that often adds additional time to the finish date for a piece. It's not like you put a piece on canvas and you just hand it over to the gallerist, and the gallerist takes it from there and puts it in a show, and you show up at the opening, you drink wine, you cheese, hope your work sells. It's this different path in public art, where you're very much kind of a project manager. You're doing a series of designs that have to go through rules by multiple panels and stakeholders, and then fabrication. If you don't have your own metal foundry or CNC cutter or whatever, you don't have all the equipment to fabricate your stuff at your own studio, then you have to go out and contract with someone who does, companies that do that. And they have multiple projects they're working on for multiple different clients. You fit in their schedule. Sometimes, like in the case of Spokane, I wanted to make sure that in addition to the powder coating, which is the painting that went on those cut metal sculptures, I want to make sure there was graffiti coating on it. Because these sculptures were going to be installed between a library, a water park, a high school, and there was like this, there were multiple walking trails and stuff around. And it's like, okay, these are going to be tagged so fast. Potentially, and there's no like fencing around them. They're kind of out in the green space between these different public spaces. And so I really wanted that graffiti coating, but taking the time to add that graffiti coating pushed the installation deadline back where it had to happen the following year. But I was still contractually obligated to deliver the artwork at a certain time. So I had to hire art movers to actually go pick up my artwork and, drive across the mountains from Tacoma to Spokane. And they put it in their storage over the winter time. And Spokane Libraries had it installed the following spring. So that was a deadline stretch that happened because of my abundance of caution, that I said, trust me, you're going to want this graffiti coating. And the powder coaters had to order it, and that added time to it and stuff like that. So that was something that was kind of, yes, it was in my control. I could have delivered it without the graffiti coating, but then they would have been calling me like, how do I fix this? Now they just have to use soap and water to wash it off. If one of the high school students decides to be creative and add some magic marker, spray paint to more pieces. So.
Two other things. Africa Town and the thing you did in the ID in Seattle, like the patio.
Oh, okay. Okay, he's talking about, in one of the buildings in the International District in Seattle, I did a cut metal piece for a balcony in an apartment building. It's called Uncle Bob's Place. And it's right across the street from, what's the name of that museum?
Wing Loop, yep.
Thank you. The Wing Loop Museum. So there's a new apartment building that was built in the last couple of years. It's across the street from the Wing Loop building. And I did one of the balcony designs, and that's a cut metal piece as well. And you're asking me about Africa Town.
Right.
That piece has not been installed yet because we're waiting for the office where my mural is supposed to go to be finished.
Okay.
The building is open, but that particular part of the building, I think is, last time I was up there was still in construction. They hadn't left the drywall up, so I can't get a mural drywall into the drywall.
So those last two you found out through public art calls, or how'd you find out?
Yeah, those were both public art calls. So to find public art calls, there's several websites I go to. Now that I'm a known artist, I'm on several rosters from Seattle, from the state. Sometimes I get invited to apply for stuff.
That's how you got Portland.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were invited.
I got invited to apply to that. And I'm known in art circles. And sometimes it's just like, Jasmine, we think you'd be perfect for this project. And they just reach out to me. I'm getting kind of a reputation for doing memorial work. So the piece that I'm working on now for the Gateway Center in Portland is a memorial piece for victims of domestic violence and sex trafficking and sexual assault. So that's the work I'm working on now. Okay. Any other questions?
What's in the future? What do you got planned for?
Oh, do I have planned for the future?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm working on that project I just mentioned. I'm finishing up the mural for Africatown. I have to reach out to the project manager on that project to see where they're at as far as putting the drywall in the room where my mural is supposed to go. And applying for more stuff. And I have my own nonprofit where I do arts education and we teach classes in the after-school space and stuff. So and teaching visual art and electronic music to young people and teaching more about the importance of art for the community and youth education.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay, now, is he still gonna film? I have questions.
Yeah, go for
You
it.
know, I never asked you last time, but when you went to Howard, what teachers did you have? Did you have art teachers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was maybe a couple of just maybe 1 or 2 art classes I took while I was at Howard because I had to take all the history classes. Transferring from art school to liberal arts school, I had all these classes I had to take that were not art related. That language, psychology, sociology, history. So I was able to fulfill some of my history requirements by taking African American art history, which they did not teach at Columbus College of Art at the time. And I wrote lots of papers and stuff like that while I was at Howard. But I really love those first.
Did you ever, I don't know if James Porter was there when you were there, if he was retired yet, because you ran the museum.
Mm-hmm. He might have been.
So
I mean, I'm trying to think of who names in mind. Was he dean?
he ran the museum. He probably taught classes, but there was this huge debate between Porter and Locke about the direction of African art. My boss at Colgate was one of the first African American art historians to graduate from Harvard. He's long gone, but we had a lot of African American shows there. And one of the debates that was covered in the 80s, probably earlier, was between Porter and Locke. And Porter said that African American artists need to paint history and culture because it had been misrepresented. And then Locke said mainstream, like Sam Gilliam, abstract expressionism and pouring, but then can be a palette or something that has roots in Africa when you're still doing non-objective type of work. And there's really not, you can do either one of this, advance in either direction. Right. There's not like a specific choice. I'm just curious if you knew Porter.
Well,
is he so famous?
I remember reading, those names ring a bell for me because we did talk about African American art history a lot when I was at Howard. And I think I was excited about being able to see the aesthetic that I had be celebrated. When I was at Columbus College of Art and Design, in addition to many of my professors not being very welcoming for just me being in class, I remember taking a color theory class and having my color theory teacher pull me aside and tell me my colors were too bright and my palette was too bright. And if I could hurt her eyes, and she wanted me to tone it down. And I asked, well, I'm not really excited about pastel colors. I like, I like bright, jubilant colors, exciting colors, and I like intensity and saturation. I like that stuff. And she basically just told me, so if you don't change it, then I'll mark you down a letter grade for the semester. And it's like one piece that she thought was just too bright. Out of all the work I'd done that semester, she said, well, you're on track to get an A, but I'll mark you down to a B if you don't change this. I said, okay, give me a B. Because I'm not going to change, you're not explaining to me why I need to make something pastel. And she was very much into stonewash jeans and pinks and lavenders, and that's just not me. You know, interesting, when I went to Howard and actually studied African American art, and I saw so many African American artists using bright, saturated colors. And it's like, I didn't realize I was part of the movement. You know, I didn't realize that was an aesthetic that was maybe coming from my culture. And I started looking into more African fabrics and designs and stuff like that, and that's what got me excited about. I said, oh, okay, you know, here it's fine for me to use those bright colors, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Maybe it hurt her eyes, but maybe that's just she was speaking from her culture, and where being delicate and feminine is muted and pastel and stonewashed, and you know. But I don't know. I don't know what her rationale was behind that, but I'm guessing because I remember having this she pulled me out in the hallway like I'd done something naughty, like painting something right. It's a color class.
Did you have a teacher that you connected to? That you
Not really
liked,
at
that you
Columbus
liked?
College of Art and Design. I mean, I had maybe a couple of instructors that weren't obnoxious, but you know, I found out once I left when I tried to give references to continue my education or find out, because back then there wasn't the internet as much, and you couldn't look up suppliers for different materials as easily. When I tried to contact some of my professors at Columbus College of Art and Design and asked them, I said, how can I order this particular product for my work? They wouldn't call me back, and it's kind of okay. So this is after I went all that debt to go to that school. I can't get a reference. Even the instructors that got A in the class. So that was something that I found problematic. And I don't know, it wasn't encouragement. It was kind of like, well, what are you doing here? Who is you? Even though I consistently was one of the top students of my year. In those classes at school. Well, that's one of the reasons why I transferred, because it's like, you know, I felt that, you know, it's like, time to go. I'd rather have like a fulfilling college experience than one that's just a grind. And my instructor is just kind of sneering at me as I walk into class and stuff like that. You know?
I was gonna say, on the color theory class, like bright, vibrant colors aren't colors, what the heck? Like, shouldn't you know how to work with those too?
Yeah.
But I keep looking at the first painting you presented on, and I keep thinking, I think it's Frida Kahlo who said she paints her liberation. And something that I really love about this is you told us that the portrait part isn't complete, and now I can see where it kind of cuts off and I can see the canvas and things. I love the idea that you made a choice to not complete it in the portrait class kind of way, but that you made it complete with all this other stuff that is meaningful and beautiful. And like, as soon as you said quilting, I was like, oh, absolutely, I see the quilts there, and like, it's so much more than complete by being completed by that, and I just love it. I think it's very, I don't know, in Mexican culture, we'd call it anti-colonialist. I love it. It's like throwing off some shackles or something. It's beautiful.
Yeah, well, and to kind of, from, taking those African American history classes, I learned about, Black artists were created throughout American history.
Yeah.
And how that isn't necessarily celebrated as something being at the forefront of the art world. And how craft is often been treated as if it's not art, and a lot of the work of art that women create is considered craft instead
People
of,
who've never quilted.
and so, really diving into that and one being excited about, fabric and experimenting. During when I was in college at Howard, I saved it from the sewing machine and started quilting some stuff. And, I wasn't very good at it, but still, I wanted to work with fabric because that was something that that many African American women had done in the past. And I didn't really meet Visa Butler, who's known for her quilts. She was at Howard, I think during some of the same years I was there. But I'm not sure if we had classes together. We might have. I'd have to, I don't know what her schedule was. But I'm not surprised that she came out of Howard making quilts.
Yeah.
Because they kind of talk about that as part of our heritage at Howard in our classes. So
I have more questions about that. Are those a combination of motifs in the background from different ethnic groups?
Yeah, and there is actually a quilt. I think it's in the collection of Smithsonian that was made by an enslaved quilter that has a lot of these motifs in it. So I was kind of reflecting some of what was in that quilter's work in the motifs in the painting.
Some look like an image in one of our textbooks, but then there's, I'm not sure if it's the Dogon, the origin myth from I think it's a crocodile.
Yeah, so the crocodile.
There's quite a lot going on in there.
Yeah, and the snake, and I was trying to incorporate a little bit of kente cloth and leather cloth as well, and some of the symbology and some of the quotes from the African times that would help, serve as directions for the Underground Railroad and stuff like that. So trying to go for that.
So I'm pretty sure, because this is not my area, but they put quilts out, because I live in upstate New York, and they'd have a celebration of the Underground Railroad once a year, like in the next town over. It's very snowy. They put them out where they we're running through the forest at night, and then maybe going in a house, like, welcome to stay. And I think that it might have had some kind of sign that they were able to stay there. I think that was quilts.
Yeah.
I know they found in the church these vases in Syracuse, in the college, would have been a museum, but that were from the Underground Railroad, because Harriet Tubman, that wasn't very far away.
Right. Yeah, and that reading books like that were kind of documenting that history was what got me more excited about working in fabric. And so I could go to the fabric store and buy a bunch of ornaments, and it's cheaper than oil painting. and my roommates are going to complain less about, you know, the smell of turpentine if I'm working with strips of fabric. And so that's when it also precipitated my kind of shift when I went from Columbus College of Art Design, where everybody's painting in oils and stuff like that, to Howard, where, you know, it's like, okay, fabric is something that I can use. And you know, maybe that's something that's really more indicative of my culture. And then I can pick brightly colored fabric and nobody will tell me to quiet that down. You know, so.
Yeah.
I'm just happy to know the stories.
She's a font of information. We can just keep asking questions.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming out to my artist talk.
Thank you.